Happy Friday. Welcome here to another edition of HuskerOnline Headlines. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple. We've got a lot to unpack here with everything going on between the transfer portal, the draft. But first of all, the big headline, at least of the week here around the state of Nebraska, is the volleyball match that will take place in Memorial Stadium against Nebraska Omaha. The match sold out in less than 2 days, and we're pleased to welcome in Nebraska Athletic Director Trev Alberts, former Husker great as well, here on HuskerOnline Headlines to hear more about that. Trev, first of all, welcome to the show, and congratulations. This idea, I'm sure when you came up with the idea to put in there, you knew it was going to take off, but I can't imagine you thought you'd be chasing a potential world record for a female-attended sporting event.
Well, good day, Sean and Steve. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's frankly pretty humbling. I mean, Husker Nation is just different. And I have this great privilege of going across the country, meeting with colleagues in the Big Ten, and people are really envious of our fan base. And so we're going to try really hard not to take them for granted. But, when we started thinking about this and the fact of the matter is, I was hoping about 35 to 40. I know what we are really hoping to be able to give to the other participants. I know what the expenses are. And so we're like, okay, here's the break-even point. We got to have at least 35, 40 with concessions, and it'll be worthwhile. I never thought this would happen. And I never thought it'd be one thing that it would happen over the course of a couple of weeks. But, Husker fans broke the internet. It was wild. And really proud of our team. Our team has worked really, really hard. We got a lot of work in front of us. But, John likes to dream big, and sometimes I have to challenge him with, wait a minute, you want us to dream big. How about you dream big? And so he's fired up. All we need now is some decent weather because I can't imagine what it's going to be like to try to put 90,000 people into Vanny if we have some bad weather. So obviously we're thrilled, just grateful. It just shows how much people care about this university and athletic department. It's also indicative of the leadership of John Cook and Terry Pettit, and just this vision that they had in our young women. Really, really proud of them, and looking forward to August 30th.
So at 83,000 tickets sold as of yesterday, 82,900. Now, you mentioned 90,000. The largest crowd to attend a women's sporting event in the U.S. is 90,185, and that was for the 1999 Women's World Cup final between U.S. and China. Is there a threat here to surpass that record? Can you do that? Are you able to do that?
Yeah, I certainly think there's a threat to that, Steve. We do have the field itself. There's some standing room stuff, and so it's really hard to tell. We were over 90,000 for Garth Brooks, when we had that concert here, and so. It's amazing with, just the physical size of the structure. I've asked our team to really take a hard look at, how do we do this? Is there additional space? How can we, and we need to do it safely. Obviously there's fire marshal, there's codes, those kinds of things. We never want to do anything that would put anybody at risk, but there's an opportunity to rethink, look at how does the layout look? How can we do it? We also have to be a little bit careful, guys. Let's think about this. We had our season ticket holders for volleyball who are some of our most ardent supporters. And early on, I thought to myself, well, we'll just, as we sell this thing out, we'll just move the court further and further. Well, that's really not fair to the people who have been with your program the longest. So while there might be a little bit of movement for the actual, court, I think it's going to be relatively static. Those folks that bought the first tickets, we need to ensure, in our season ticket holders that they're taken care of. And the nice thing at a place like Memorial Stadium with all of the ribbon board and the video boards, those folks, in South Stadium actually have an opportunity to see it through the video boards. But I think part of it is just being part of it, being part of history being made. So we're going to keep working on it, Zip. I think at minimum, this has to be the largest sporting event ever in the United States, for women and women. Volleyball. Let's try to knock that down.
Okay. Trev, I know you said that this is probably a one-time thing, but when you start to see the financial windfall this is going to make the university and the volleyball programs, it's going to be hard to say, if we can do it again, why not do it one more time a few years down the road?
Well, it's a good point, Sean. And, I think what happened is when we had the success we had with Garth Brooks, and then you have a success like this, sort of nationally with all kinds of booking agents or what have you. I mean, you develop a reputation as a place that supports big ideas and big events. And while I certainly am not going to be, breaking any news here, the reality is we've had others that have reached out and said, hey, what about this? And so it's not beyond the realm of possibility that we don't think about, every summer trying to do something, that's unique, different. We're all looking at, hey, we've got this incredible facility. It's activated 7 football games a year. How do we look at our assets and resources differently and engage them? And as new, we're just bringing a new subset of people, maybe new eyeballs. I know most of us think that, well, these are all the same people who come to Husker football games. The reality is there's going to be a lot of people at this volleyball game that don't come to football games regularly. And hopefully they have a great experience, and maybe they, engage in other sports and become part of our family. So it's a great thing, not just for the athletic department. This is really good for our university. We're looking at enrollment initiatives and those types of things, bringing people to your campus, that's important stuff.
Absolutely, Trev. Switching gears to football. Now, it was very striking, and I believe it was in February on your statewide radio show. You had expressed on that show, and you kind of almost said it as an aside, that the spring game would be more game-like. And you seem to want that. And it turned out that way, and I got to tell you, it was incredibly refreshing. But why was that important to you?
Well, I think it's important to our fans, Steve. I mean, it's part of respecting what our fans expect from our program. I really feel passionate about this. It's not just about football. At the end of the day, we need programs that are reflective of the passion, ideals, and values that Nebraskans hold dear, that our alumni, that our supporters and donors. And, we're Nebraska. We should just really embrace being the greatest Nebraska we can be. And you know what? We don't have to be anything else. We've proven that if we just are Nebraska, really good things can happen. And so, I think this is a thing that Coach Rhule, I think, is really made an impact on him as he's traveled our state. And I've heard him talk about this, and you go out to Western Nebraska, and he went to a basketball game, and he talked about how this fan that he met with his family getting ice cream down the Haymarket talked about, well, we're going to head back home. So they drove 4 hours to come to one of our sporting events. People don't understand the commitment that Husker Nation makes to support our young men and young women. And so to honor that and to respect that, I think you have to do things that are important to them, Steve.
Sticking on the topic of football, you've got a lot on your plate with facilities. The new football facility is set to open. What is the update there? How much of that facility will be ready to go this summer? And then what will be kind of the other phasing as far as opening the rest of that building up?
Yeah, it's a good question. And we're really excited about the Go Big project. Obviously, it's one of the reasons why Coach Rhule is here. And I just talked about, our fans, what the expectations are. Development is the DNA of Nebraska athletics. This is who we are. This is what we're really good at, and we should never stray from. So obviously the, Go Big project's the brick and mortar behind that vision. So, when you do a $165 million project, this is pretty sophisticated. The reality is we hope to have all 3 levels, all 3 phases, everything done at once prior to the fall. We're not going to be able to accomplish that goal, Sean, but what we have been able to do is say, okay, we've got a recovery plan in place, back on track in this sense, everything specific to football. So there'll be no disruption to the team. We want to make sure that, everybody who's part of the locker room, those very specific football areas, those will be done prior to the fall. Okay. So the team will be in there. Other things like the weight room will be done as well, but other things like, the training table, academic support, compliance, life skills, and perhaps even some of the coaches' offices are going to be a little bit behind. It could be 4 to 5, up to 6 months, but definitely by the end of the year, the start, of the next calendar year, everything will be done. So maybe a couple other levels that'll be about 6 months behind. But right now, we're just really focused in on the players. And quite frankly, that's what Coach Rhule wanted. this is about the players. Let's make sure that the players are taken care of first. And the other, obvious benefit we have is that we have a training table right now. So we can still utilize, those units that are active, within West Stadium. So a little bit behind on a couple of them, but player specific stuff will all be in place prior to the start of fall camp, which will be really important to the football program.
We got one final question here for Athletic Director Trev Alberts. Trev, the stadium renovations as well. You announced an architecture firm, HDR out of Omaha, a project anywhere from $200 to $500 million. Where are you at in that process? I mean, that's a wide range of what you want to spend. I mean, how do you kind of determine ultimately what direction you want to take the future of Memorial Stadium as you enter this 100th season?
Well, and that's part of the process we're going through, right? I feel very passionate about this as well. Number one, this is not my athletic department. I just happen to sit in this chair. This belongs to Nebraska. And we have a 100-year-old stadium that's iconic that we need to ensure. And I feel a burden while sitting in this seat to ensure like everything we're enjoying today is previous leadership's vision and fiscal responsibility. And our job is to say, okay, we're not talking about today, but what's the next 50 years look like at Memorial Stadium? And how do we ensure that our fans, ingress, egress, modernization, comfort, how do we look at new revenue opportunities? How do we not expect just football fans to pay increasing prices, but how do we, diversify what some of those revenue streams look like? So that's what HDR's job is. We currently have an RFP out for construction management, and we'll end up getting there. But we're running through a process right now of diving into it. It's not just the stadium. I mean, you think about how complicated this is. We have a 315,000 square foot building, the Go Big project, coming online. All the programming that's currently within the stadium a lot of that is moving over to the Go Big. So it's not just the fans, while that's very, very important, but also is how are we going to backfill these spaces? What is it? Do we look at other integration within our own campus? So I'm not smart enough to do it, guys. We've got some really smart people that understand space allocation, that understand. And so we're going to go through this process. We first need to understand how much money can we raise? What are all of our sources here? What's the total amount? And then how do we create, a vision around that that's great for our fans, that looks to the future? And ultimately what we'll be doing here early fall, late summer is once we get that plan done, we will bring that back to the university leadership and ultimately the Board of Regents. And we'll make a recommendation about what we believe we can execute. And then they'll make the decision about whether they think that this is financially, fiscally responsible and doable. But those are the details that we're in right now, working on it every single day. I'm excited about it. And I think it's the right thing to do for Nebraska, especially when you consider what's happening nationally and all the disruption. I think Nebraska has a brilliant opportunity here with this coaching staff and with some strategic thinking around our business model to really emerge from this disruption in a really positive and powerful position.
I got one more, Trev, and it's about Coach Rhule. Just real quick. I was reading some things you said early in your tenure here as the AD. You said this football job, the Nebraska head football coaching job, is a grinder job. This job has always been about people willing to pay a bigger price than the other guy. It's what you love about this place, you said. Was Rhule's sort of, now we're getting to know Matt Rhule a little bit more. Was his grinder approach, his grinder mentality, a leading factor in you hiring him? Did you know that about him? And what has been striking to you in that regard?
100%, Steve. I watched Coach Osborne as a player, and I often felt bad for him. I mean, the guy just worked, and he was so competitive. But listen, let's be honest with ourselves. There are some areas that, and every program's this way, there are strengths about this program that other people don't have. We've talked about our fan base. There are, quote, weaknesses and challenges here that we have that some others don't. And so to overcome that, number one, you have to have somebody that just works and that is driven by the work, not the ancillary benefits that come with that position, if that makes sense, right? Yeah. And so I was well aware of that. And part of, in talking to coaches, you lay a very clear vision about the expectation. And those that aren't interested in doing that probably aren't interested in being, your candidate. And so it works both ways. That certainly, didn't push Coach Rhule away. In fact, that's exactly, what he felt as well. So, leadership is so important. Who's at the top really matters, because if you start with somebody like Matt Rhule, who's a grinder, who's purpose-driven relative to helping young people have a better life, both in academics, all of the things that I had the privilege of living as a culture, as a player under Coach Osborne. If you hire a head coach who has that passion and vision, he is going to surround himself with other people, coaches, administrators, support staff, recruiting staff that thinks like him. And so you're not just hiring Matt Rhule, the grinder, you're hiring an entire staff that looks a lot like that. And that's what we're seeing right now. You're seeing it on the recruiting trail. You're seeing it with coaches that are, Matt was with me last night till 10 o'clock at a donor event, and it's not just grinder as a coach. It's every single one of these components that lead to success. It's got to matter to you. And it mattered to Coach Osborne. And Coach Osborne talked about, being willing to pay a price bigger than the guy next to you. And that has to be the secretary. That has to be the football coaches. That has to be the players. And if we have that, and that's our culture of toughness, work ethic, and unity, this place has proven you can do some pretty amazing things. And Coach Rhule's really leading the way in that area, Steve.
Thank you, Trev.
Well, Trev, we appreciate the time here on a Friday. I know you're very busy with a lot going on, and hopefully we can get you on Husker Headlines again.
Look forward to it, guys. Thanks for all you do.
All right. Thank you, Trev.
Thanks.
Have a good day.
Thanks again to Nebraska Athletic Director Trev Alberts for joining us here on HuskerOnline Headlines. A lot going on, Steve Sipple. We're going to get back to what Trev Alberts had to say, but let's get back to what probably would have led off our show if we didn't have the athletic director of Nebraska on.
Right.
Quarterback Casey Thompson has entered the transfer portal.
Yeah.
I mean, should we be surprised? I mean, we kind of had a feel where it was all going to go.
I mean, did you see this coming? Come on. When you woke up today, I saw your reaction. You were surprised.
I was surprised, but if Casey wants to be a starter and he does not think he's going to have a clear opportunity or an inside path to get that opportunity, he's going to go. And I'm sure there are teams out there that have expressed interest through back channels for him, because he is a pretty good 1-year option for a school.
Well, he was a good 1-year option at Nebraska. I mean, he had more than one, but it turns out he had more than 1 year, but it turns out he was a 1-year option.
Like, think about Alabama. They're in a quarterback's bind right now. They just took a Notre Dame guy.
Right.
Think of Alabama just took Casey Thompson right now because they need a 1-year option for Nick. I mean, he is going to have options, no doubt. But yeah, they went from 6 scholarship quarterbacks to start the week to now 3.
That's interesting.
So you go from Casey Thompson gone, Logan Smothers gone, Richard Torres gone. Right. So it's Chuba Purdy, Heinrich Harburg, and Jeff Sims.
Yeah, I can't say I saw this coming. I couldn't. Now, I have said this week that, and I mean this when I say it, that no player going into the portal should be a total surprise to anybody. And Casey Thompson going in the portal shouldn't be a total surprise to anybody. But having said that, it's not like I saw it coming. I thought that he would go into June, competing with Jeff Sims, and it'd be a 2-man race. Now, what the question becomes, and I don't know if we'll get this answer or not, what did he hear from the staff? What did Casey Thompson hear from the coaching staff, from Matt Rhule? Or did Casey just make this decision on his own? Did Nebraska want Casey back? I mean, is it possible that Matt Rhule, is it possible there was a scenario where Matt Rhule was trying to talk Casey into staying? I mean,
or if he was just openly honest and say, like, we want you on this team, but Jeff will get the number 1 reps.
Be interesting.
And Matt Rhule has said, I've heard him say this to local high school coaches. He goes, the biggest thing is, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not going to sugarcoat where your kid stands.
Right.
And I can't see him sugarcoating it to Casey Thompson. I think he's like, look, Jeff's healthy. He's had a good spring. He's going to go in number 1. You're going to be the number 2 right now. Like, I mean,
yeah, that's telling the number 1 quarterback from last year that it's very interesting.
Number 1 with a whole different staff and a whole different offense.
Right.
Number 1 in an offense that was way different than one now.
Yeah.
So you can't even, it's apples to orange. You can't compare Mark Whipple to Satterfield and Rhule.
No,
like it's a whole different deal.
He was number 1.
No, I get it, but
I'm a little surprised by it. I'm a little surprised by it. Here's the thing about it. There's a whole range of questions that we shouldn't pretend we know, because we don't. We don't know what that conversation was with Rhule and Thompson at all. We have no idea. It's sort of frustrating. I think we sort of pretend that we know, but we don't know.
I mean, we kind of have an idea, though, that there were some concerns that could he physically do all the things as a runner that they need in this offense.
That's true.
We know that now. And I do know that there's going to be teams interested in Casey Thompson.
Yeah.
I just had a writer from Florida. Florida's looking for a quarterback. And he said, if you hear anything about Casey Thompson, let us know.
Oh, there you go.
There are some teams that clearly had lousy springs with their quarterbacks.
Right. So you wonder, like, one question is, did Casey go into a meeting with Matt Rhule saying, look, these are the teams that are interested in me? Did Casey go in there with leverage? It's very possible that he did, and then decided after what he heard from Rhule that I'd be better off somewhere else.
Will he be a starter at another Power 5 school is the question.
So, yeah, I mean, that's a big question. So
I think he will.
Yeah,
I think he will.
I think he could be. So now you're, like you said, you're down to 3 scholarship quarterbacks. And I would say, and I hope people don't take this wrong, there's a pretty big drop off now between 1 and 2. There wasn't when Casey was here. If you're talking about Casey as the number 2, there wasn't a big drop off. Now what Nebraska has, now this is my opinion, I don't it'll rankle some people, but there's a big drop off now from 1 to 2. That's what you have.
Yeah, Chuba has started a couple games.
Yeah.
And then obviously Heiner Carberg's never played.
Right. What you saw in the spring game was a big drop off.
And then Jack Wolke
Yeah.
is the next guy, right?
Yeah, you didn't have a drop off. Now you do.
And all of a sudden, if Dylan Raiola doesn't come, which doesn't seem like, if you
we'll see on that, yeah,
we'll see where that goes. But they don't have a high school quarterback on the line right now either for next year if Raiola is not the guy. So
it thinned out pretty fast.
I mean, it went from 6 to 3
quick
in a couple of days.
Yeah.
So
and I don't anticipate anybody else. I mean, Chuba would be a 2-timer. He could do it though. But I don't. I mean, again, I'm not going to say, because I can't say that I saw this coming. I mean, none of us. I mean, I saw your level of surprise when it happened, so it's not like we saw it coming.
All right. Well, now you just wonder what's next for Casey Thompson. What's next for Nebraska, and we'll dive into the portal stuff here more, and go through kind of
the other guys
later in the show, right? That's because I want to go back to Trev Alberts.
Trev.
Now let's go back to, we just had the athletic director of Nebraska on, Trev Alberts, covered a lot of ground. Headline number 3, as we react to what we learned from Trev Alberts. This volleyball game thing is fascinating because I think initially it's like, yeah, it's be a fun one-time thing, but if you can make this kind of revenue on something like this, where it's a game that generally wouldn't draw this kind of, like, I don't know if you can play a big match. I don't know if a good opponent, maybe a good opponent will want to come play Nebraska in this type of match, but having it be in-state, Nebraska versus UNO, is really cool. And the amount of money they're going to make on this is incredible.
The amount of money, and then yes, I mean, there's that, and then there's also the prestige element, where you heard Trev, he believes they can threaten the largest crowd to ever attend a women's sporting event.
Think about that
in the U.S. Yeah, it's 90,185 for the 1999 Women's World Cup final between U.S. and China, and Sean, I'm just gonna say, I'll be surprised if they don't surpass that.
Like, Trev wants that. Like,
yeah. Yeah, of course he does. I mean,
it's to the point they have this concert. If that's going to take away seats, like, do you even need to have the concert? I mean, like, you've already sold it. Like,
that's a legitimate question.
And they won't even say who the band is yet. Or have they announced the? I don't think they have.
Right. The world record is 91,000 people for a women's sporting event. 91,553. That's the world record, and that's when Barcelona played Real Madrid in a soccer match in Spain in 2022. I mean, Nebraska could set a world record in August.
Yeah, and if that meant like tinkering or adjusting the concert plans, I would do it.
Yeah, I mean,
I think
not a bad thought, Sean.
If you're Trev Alberts, you're like, should we cater to maybe a B-list type country act or a world record?
But no, before you go too far, there might be a contract in place.
No, I know.
Signed, So I don't know. I don't know if it may not be an option.
It might just turn into like a little small karaoke stage. Here's the concert. So we can get the world record.
Right.
It's going to have one guy with one microphone on a small platform.
Well, I mean, honestly, they might be able to adjust stage size, I think you got to think about that. You could set a world record
because if you wanted to, you could put a lot of seats. You could put bleachers on the turf.
Yeah, this is quite a flex by Nebraska. This will be something that gets the university a lot of attention. As Trev said, this is about attracting students to Nebraska too. I mean, this will be an opportunity for a lot of people that never get into that stadium to get in it. They're not going to be able to see the volleyball games, some of them, but it's just you're there, though.
Naturally, I was reading some of the comments on ESPN. You get those people that'll say like, well, because there's nothing to do in Nebraska. Get the hell out of here. Seriously, get the hell out of here. Yeah. Like that's a ridiculous comment.
Right.
Like,
yeah, I mean,
like this is cool. Like this is like, I don't care who you are. Like a game against another smaller Division I college is going to set a world record for volleyball.
Right.
Not World Cup soccer, not a professional sport, a college volleyball game with two teams from a state with a population less than 2 million people.
Right.
Come on.
Yeah. Great idea.
I think John's going to want to do it again.
Yeah. And it's a great idea, and it's been really well executed. And you heard Trev say he didn't expect this. John Cook certainly didn't expect it. I've read a lot of John Cook comments. He did not anticipate this at all. So
it reminds you of like what they do in hockey when they play the game outside.
Yeah.
I mean, like that, they played in football stadiums. I think the Big House at Michigan did one of them there. Mm-hmm. What do they call that? The Frozen Classic
I don't know what the hell it's called, but you're right.
But this is what it reminds me of. It's something like that where it's just so out of the box. I mean, the basketball game on the aircraft carrier. But yeah, we're like, so I'll be curious what they do with the setup.
See, there's the stage the way it is now. Do you move that closer to the 50-yard line? Do you move it closer to I think you got to, right? I mean, they weren't anticipating that south end zone would have a lot of people in it, but it's going to have a lot of people in it.
Yeah. Do you move some of your prime season ticket holders down to the floor and create more floor seats?
Right. Well, those are pleasant problems to have for sure.
But Trev, knowing Trev like we do, he wants the world record. I mean,
yeah. And I think Nebraska wants the world record.
I mean, people around the world are gonna be like, wait, I mean, this is a headline. Like when this happens,
oh yeah, it's a big deal.
And it's going to be televised, I believe, on BTN for sure.
I think so. Yeah.
It's but we're going to be in Minnesota because is it the day before? The game's on Thursday night. I want to say the volleyball might be Wednesday. Yeah. So,
Abby Barmore.
It's going to be a big, big deal for Abby to follow the game. All right, let's go back to draft talk here. Sorry if I'm off headlines here, Megan. I'm trying to remember where we're at. Nebraska with the draft. We'll find out more tonight and Saturday where the Huskers fall. But we do know this, Sip. Nebraska has not had a first-round draft pick now for since 2011, Prince Mukamara.
Right. No first rounders. And that obviously, I'm not going to get on a big soapbox here, but Ohio State last night had 3 in the top 20.
Iowa
picks.
Had 2.
Yeah, Iowa had
Kansas
2.
State had 1.
Yeah.
Iowa State had their first rounder since 1973.
Wow. So yeah, I mean, Nebraska, it goes without saying. Okay, just put it this way: when people ask you this all the time, come on, Sean, what's happened to Nebraska? You get that question a lot from people that don't live around here, media that don't live around here. Sip, what happened? Well, the first thing I go to is
the draft.
Yeah, the draft. They haven't had a first rounder since 2011, and then I think you can also say they haven't had an All-American. They haven't had an All-American since 2011 either. That was Levante David, right? They haven't had a All-American offensive lineman since 2001. Now that's ridiculous. That's really a bad. That's not a
like Spencer Long was on track to be one, then he got hurt.
Right. They haven't had an All-American offensive lineman since 2001. They used to produce them regularly. Regularly. I mean, 8 per decade, 7 per decade. And now it's dried up.
Well, they led the nation.
So what's happened? Well, what's happened in Nebraska? Those two stats are pretty big right there.
And you see Illinois had a first rounder. I mean, Boston College had the first receiver drafted. K-State, I mentioned earlier. But I thought it was also interesting that the SEC and the Big Ten were tied with 9 first-round draft picks each. Now, if you add USC, Oklahoma, Texas, it would be 11 to 10.
Okay.
The SEC would have a slight edge by 1, but when you do that, 21 of the 32 picks come from these 2 leagues.
Right. And to be clear, when I talk about this, you're trying to topple Ohio State and Michigan. Michigan had a couple first rounders.
Just one. They had one.
Okay, one first rounder. You're trying to beat these teams. Iowa had 2.
Ohio State had 3.
Yeah.
Georgia had 3. Alabama had 3. Northwestern, as you know, had Peter Skoronski.
Here's the deal: you're not beating Ohio State with no All-Americans on your team. No, unless you get lucky and upset them. But if they have All-Americans and first rounders and you don't, what do you think's going to happen? You might push them. It might look pretty good sometimes, but how often are you going to beat them?
A la 2021.
Yeah. When they went there and pushed them. But I mean, what's that mean? You pushed them.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see. And, you get asked these questions on HuskerOnline with the draft, like who will be Nebraska's next first round. And you just kind of like get deer in the headlights, stone face, because you don't really know how to answer it.
Last year they had 2 second-round picks. So they were kind of knocking on the door, kind of. Cam Jurgens, Cam Taylor-Britt. Those guys were second-round picks, and that's progress. I mean, but yeah, if you can get multiple first rounders, then you're kind of in business, right? So this year, you want to talk this year Husker draft?
Yeah, let's so you got Trey Palmer, O'Shawn Mathis, Garrett Nelson, and Travis Vokalek. Those are probably the 4. I mean, you could lump Caleb Tanner, but I think we both agree he's more than likely a quality free agent guy.
Yeah, that would be a surprise. I think Vokalek would be a mild surprise if Travis Vokalek, if he would get drafted.
I think his injury stuff is probably what's going to hurt him.
Right. Trey Palmer. Now the question is could he go in the 2nd or 3rd round, or is he going to wait till 4th or 5th?
A lot of receivers went off the board in the 1st round. So
yeah, that helps.
That helps him slide into tonight, possibly. But yeah, for sure, we know he's going to get picked. After that,
there's a possibility that Nebraska just has one. I mean, there's a possibility. Now, what I've heard is that Garrett Nelson has a very good chance to get drafted. A lot of people are surprised when I say that. They are. I get it.
I mean, he didn't make the combine.
Right. So
what's the data on non-combine invites?
Don't know.
I mean, it's not good though. Like, I mean, the NFL teams invite the players to the combine. So
yeah, we'll see on that. I think there's a good chance of. I think they could.
So you think Garrett Nelson will get drafted based on
based on what I'm hearing, late round, 6 or 7. Yeah. And I think O'Shawn could. Again, late. It'll be late.
It'll be okay. Final headline here. Let's go back to the transfer portal for Nebraska. It's been it's been quite a week. Nebraska now, I believe it's 8 with Casey Thompson.
Yeah, 8 with Casey.
8 entries in the portal this week. So they're at 90 players on scholarship as we tape this show around lunchtime on Friday. They've got to be at 85.
Okay.
Now, remember, some of these guys can take the retirement package and stay at Nebraska if they want and not count towards the 85 and keep all their benefits as a scholarship student athlete. So are there some players on the roster that have taken that package? My guess is yes.
Yeah.
But we know there are 8 that have gone in the transfer portal, 3 of them being quarterbacks, 2 of them being wide receivers, 2 of them being defensive backs. And then where am I off here?
Well, they've had Braxton Clark. I'm just going to name them. We might as well just name them. Braxton Clark, for people not keeping track.
Oh, one defensive lineman,
Yeah.
Stephon Wynn.
Wynn, Logan Smothers, Sean Hardy, Victor Jones, Richard Torres, Noah Pulla Gates, and Casey Thompson. So those are the 8. And as far as impact, surely you'd say Casey, and then I would say Stephon Wynn, the senior defensive lineman after that. When you lose a big body, it's who's played at Alabama, who had 22 tackles last year. I mean, me and you talked about this off air yesterday. Wynn won't have trouble finding a place to play.
Wynn and Thompson are going to have options.
I would think so. Yeah. Good options. Very good options.
Like, yeah, that's kind of handy. Like Logan Smothers, Torres, probably group of 5 type options, maybe FCS options. Braxton Clark, probably group of 5, maybe Noah Pulla Gates, group of 5.
I think so.
I mean, I'm just trying to, I don't, other than Wynn and Thompson, I'm not sure I see any other Power 5 guys there.
Okay.
Do you?
Well, it depends what people are looking for.
There's no tape to back up your.
Not really. I mean, Braxton Clark had some tape early in his career. He's faded off a little bit. Logan, it's got to be if it's our offense that runs a quarterback, he's in business. It's just the throwing, the arm strength component with Logan. Yeah, I don't know, Sean. I hate to, like a Richard Torres. Couldn't he end up at a Big 12 school, Richard Torres?
I mean, Kansas State
won Power
him.
5. I mean,
Kansas and Kansas State wanted him.
Yeah, I don't think you could rule out a guy like Richard Torres ending up at like a Kansas or a Kansas State.
If they took a quarterback in his year already, that's the spot for him. Like, you have to have spots available on the chart that makes sense. You can't just, hey, we offered him in high school, let's take him now.
No, I know. But yeah, we'll just have to see on that. But 8, and there's probably a couple others that we don't.
I mean, I think there's a few that have taken the retirement package, but we don't know. Like, the roster's not been updated on Huskers.com either. I've checked.
It hasn't. Okay.
And I'd imagine there'll be just kind of a mass update made randomly at Friday at 7 p.m. or something.
Yeah, the news of the day, of course, is
Casey Thompson in the portal. And
I've been telling people I had no intel that was going to happen. So from that standpoint, I'm surprised.
Well, even Rhule talking about him, like the last week of spring ball, how people, he's the first one in the building. He's the last one out the building. He's on the sidelines in the headset talking to me during the scrimmages. Like, I mean, they kind of put some dialogue out there that things were going well with him behind the scenes.
Right. And we're just not, obviously we're just not privy to that all important conversation he had with Rhule this week. You just love to know what that sounded like. What was that? What gotta be nice to know. what was the gist of that conversation?
Or did somebody get to them with an opportunity elsewhere that was better? And he said, hey, if I don't have an opportunity to know that I'm going to be the starter here, I'm going to go there.
It's a very fascinating world now in college football. It really is. Because it's very possible Casey went into that meeting with Rhule with leverage.
But he's on a hell of an NIL package, one would think, at Nebraska right now. I mean, we know
they announced that he was on it.
Well, and we know he's got a nice 2-bedroom apartment because we've talked to him about it before. We know he drives a vehicle. He's tweeted pictures about his furniture, and obviously he has some sort of compensation package. So it wasn't like he wasn't making money here. I mean, clearly he wants to play.
Yeah. So that's So that's the next thing to watch. Where's he end up? And I imagine that could happen pretty quickly.
He'll go somewhere good. That's my prediction right now. He will end up being in the Power 5 somewhere. Yeah. Because there are a lot of teams that left spring ball that maybe don't like their quarterback situation.
There's some high profile teams you could say that about. So Casey's the type of guy that you can plug in and he can learn fast. and he can learn an offense fast. He can acclimate to a school fast. He's graduated. Hell, he has a master's degree. That part's not going to be a challenge. He just can assimilate very quickly because he's a mature individual.
Think about this. He's played for Tom Herman as a head coach, Steve Sarkisian, Scott Frost, Mickey Joseph, Matt Rhule, and now wherever he goes. He will have worked under 6 different managers, head coaches.
Amazing. Yes, that's incredible.
I mean, you talk about ROS or RLS. I mean, it's real life type stuff there.
It really is. It's becoming increasingly common, though. I mean, you can say that now about a lot of guys. They just cycle through assistants like nothing. The world's changed. I'm not saying it's better or worse. It's just different now.
All right. Well, it's been a fun show. I think we got to shut down and start typing now. We got to get some work done here.
Yeah.
But thank you again to Athletic Director Trev Alberts for coming on. A lot of ground covered with Trev. Lots going on at the transfer portal. So make sure you're on HuskerOnline.com. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest on that as well. As that there's still more to come on that side of things. But the big piece, Casey Thompson, go to HuskerOnline.com. We'll have more reaction, more coverage of that. For Husker Online Headlines, I'm Sean Callahan with Steve Sipple.